to Two Giant Goofballs, a New York Giants podcast. Are you a goofball that loves Giants football? If so, sit back and relax as we talk about the team that both excites and frustrates us so much. And now, here are your goofball hosts, Drew and Rob.
Welcome, fellow goofballs, to Two Giant Goofballs, New York Giants podcast. I am Drew, joined as always by...
me, Rob. Let's get down to some hard knocks and some good old day one training. Ooh,
Day one? Which one is it? This is the first year of training camp.
Yeah, for some players on the New York Giants.
Very first century. We'll just keep on going back. If I can turn back time.
You be sure.
Exactly. So guys, we got a lot of news here. We got injury talk because it's not a Giant season without some injury talk here. Of course, we got all kinds of talk about the first day of training camp and what to expect there. We got to talk about Hard Knocks from last night because that was actually a very fun episode, I thought there.
That was good. Yeah.
So let's dive right into it. Of course, we're gonna dive in. We don't like to harp on the bad. We like to say it, get it out the way, move on, move past it, and try to be a little more positive. So we got to start off with the bad. And the first thing we're going to talk about is injuries. Boo, injuries. But yeah, we got a lot of guys here on the injured list here to start off the training camp here. You see two there on the picture there for those of you watching the video there. So tackle Evan Neal and cornerback Aaron Robinson start on the PUP. Now, Evan Neal obviously was last seen doing his version of Wicked Witch of the West on a bicycle during the OTAs. We haven't really heard much about him since. Seems the ankle injury is still being an issue. I'll say this. There's been some back and forth on the last couple hours on Twitter on his ankle injury. I know Bobby Skinner, I know Mace, both friends of the show there had mentioned that he had sprained his ankle. They thought the Giants went to go ahead and try to have him still play through it, and then it turned out later on it was actually broken, not sprained. I will say Carl Banks did dispute that on Twitter. I don't have any medical information, obviously, on Evan Neal, so I can't say that's right or wrong. But yeah, he's still having that ankle issue. He's going to be starting off on the PUP there at that point. Aaron Robinson just lives on the PUP. That's where his home is.
Pretty much.
That's his position on the field at this point is left PUP. I think we've forgotten what he looks like.
Litter pups.
Yeah, it's like, oh my gosh, he's got more pups than an animal rescue. It's horrible. Like, it's just like I just don't get it. I think you're gonna keep him on for right now because you can't cut him obviously while he's injured. But it's like the second that man gets healthy, he's gone. Like unless he shows up amazing on the practice field, just get rid of him while you still can because he's bound to get hurt again. It's just bad.
Yeah, pretty much.
So defensive backs Jalen Mills and Stanley Thomas Oliver are both starting camp on the declared non-football injury. So that means they basically came in hurt. It had nothing to do with football. It was just an unrelated injury that they had. So we'll see what happens there. Not much of a difference really between that and the PUP, except the Giants aren't responsible for anything that happens going forward at that point. So, they don't have to pay them for things because it's non-work related. If they need to cut them, that won't affect the fact that they're injured. But as Deb says, what are we ever going to do without Evan Neal? I'm just glad he's able now to flip burgers officially. Just put the cast on him, let him go ahead and flip some burgers, let him go. Just say it seems to be the position he's best known for. Left burger flipper.
Yeah.
Now, also, obviously, it was reported earlier that Theo Johnson, the rookie tight end we got in the 4th round from Penn State, is also going to start off the training camp on the PUP. That did happen as expected. Joe Shane and Brian Dable had a beginning of training camp press conference there. Usually we talk about those press conferences. To be honest with you guys, I didn't think there was much to really talk about there, so we're not going to talk too much about it. But the only interesting piece to come out of it was Theo Johnson is expected back soon, according to what Joe Shane said. So at least that's good because we still don't know what the injury even was or what caused it. So, good to see that he's coming back soon. Again, guys, they're going to be cautious with some of these guys injury-wise. It's the beginning of training camp. If you're going to miss out on anything, miss out on the beginning of training camp. It's not that huge
Absolutely.
deal. It really isn't. What's a bigger deal is being available at the end of training camp when the regular season starts up. That's what's important. Don't get me wrong, especially for a rookie, it'd be nice to him, get him on the field with the teammates, get him used to working around stuff, get him used to NFL speed, because there is a difference between Penn State speed and Giant speed. Like, there is a difference there in the quality of people playing around you and the people you're playing against. But, that's the most important thing, is he's healthy and he's available during the regular season there. So let's get into injury news here. It's day one of training camp here, guys. So we can't go a day without an injury. That's the Giant way. Jermaine Illuminor injured at practice today. And I'll tell you guys, if you listen to some of the Giants media out there, the sky is falling. The season's over. Just give up now. We're getting the first overall pick. Like, it's the worst thing ever. Woe is me. Like, guys, it's like sometimes you sit there and you gotta, we talk about the negative mentality of the Giants fan base overall. Let's be honest, we are a negative fan base. We are. We never love a player.
I see, Drew.
Once they retire, we're like, oh my god, they were the greatest thing ever. Like, I wish I was old enough to remember what it was like when LT played to hear people trash talk about him. I'm sure that happened back then as well. Like, remember Eli? Classic example. He's average. Blah, 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 blah. Now he's retired. I miss Eli. He's the greatest thing ever. Like, that's the way we are as a fan base. But part of what makes us so negative is honestly the media. And you would have swore this guy's out for the year the way they're reacting today.
Dude looked like he had a cramp from too big of a breakfast burrito.
Seriously, that he walked off on his own. It was upper body. I don't know, but anyway, Charlotte Carroll, who's a beat writer for the Giants for The Athletic, said was recording the play and captured when Jermaine Illuminor went down. Looks like Dexter Lawrence ran into his side. So it appears to be an incidental contact that caused the injury there. A cart was called for Jermaine Illuminor. He flew it off. He's like, nope, I'm good. And just walked off his own power. For those wondering, one thing I looked at, this is separate from the injury, but I looked at this specifically, the tape, because, I wasn't there for the training camp, being down here in Florida, obviously. And Rob, of course, like most of us working stiffs, had to be at work today. So I was curious, because of the fact that we have Jermaine Illuminor obviously at right tackle, because of the fact that Evan Neal is on the PUP now, who was playing guard. And I was looking for numbers to see, because obviously they're in pads. Not pads. They're in jerseys and helmets. They're no pads, but jerseys and helmets. It's kind of hard to see who is who. So I was looking for numbers, because some of the new guys we don't know the numbers on, obviously, yet. We don't know those by heart yet. And I noticed there was a 64 out there. I was like, who is that? I think that's got to be it. And it's exactly who I was thinking it probably was. Aaron Stinney was the one playing left guard in Illuminor's spot. So the starting line was Andrew Thomas, Aaron Stinney, John Michael Schmitz, John Runyon Jr., and Jermaine Illuminor. Now, once Illuminor went out, Josh Azudu went in and played right tackle there. So just for those who are wondering how the hierarchy, so to speak, of the line is shaping up there. Originally, there was no word on what the injury was. They did say it did not appear to be a lower body injury, which is the biggest thing for us guys. One more ACL tear, and we're going to flip the hell out.
Yeah.
Many media members, like I said, though, they were going crazy, like acting as a season-ending injury. So listen, guys, we will always stress this. When there's news going on, we don't have the full story yet. Wait to freak out. Don't freak out. Oh my God, he got injured. Like, he walked off on his own. He had a 350-pound guy run into him. Of course, it's going to happen.
Oh no.
Yeah. Like, you try getting hit by a Kia Spectre and see what happens. Like, that's basically what just happened. Okay. Like, Dexter Lawrence is a mountain of a man. Like, that's going to hurt. But like I said, always we're going to suggest have some patience till stuff does come out. The good news is, I haven't heard the Giants or Illuminor or anybody else say that, but I've heard a lot of rumors tonight that it's a bruised rib issue. Jermaine Illuminor even tweeted later on tonight, "I'm good." That's all he said. I'm good. He doesn't say I'm good unless he's good, guys. So don't worry. Patience.
Be happy.
See what happens before we freak out, because the media will make you do it. They were determined to do it. Fear makes you go ahead and watch their stuff more. Fear makes you read their articles more. Fear makes you keep checking things to see what's going on.
Click,
Don't
click,
let
click,
them
click,
freak you
click,
out.
click.
It's becoming like political news. It's like all negative. Like I don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
It's getting that bad. It really is. Like everybody's about the clickbait stuff. So we're just gonna call it like it is. He was injured. He'll be fine, according to him. It's about as good a source as you get. So don't worry, guys. Be happy.
All right.
Let's get into the rest of the training camp here because, again, today's day one of training camp. We've been waiting forever for football to start, and football has started back up again, guys. It's that time for us to go ahead and focus on actual football. And much like preseason, training camp is one of those days where we go, oh, my God, yes, we get real football back. And then we just realize it's just practice. That's all it is. We're talking about practice here. We're going out on Iverson on you guys. So, here's some of the notes. Dan Salamini for the Giants was the reporter they had on hand here. Here's some of his notes. He said the play of the day was when defensive lineman Jordan Phillips tipped the ball into what became a Boogie Basham interception. Rookie Darius Masau made the hit of the day on a running back trying to catch a ball there on a short route. I did try to find out who that running back was, by the way, and who threw the ball as well. They don't give you that. This is much like the OTAs. We talked about this. They're going to say whoever did positive and try to leave anything negative out of it. So, like, if you notice that the note I said a minute ago about the interception, they didn't mention who it was off of. By the way, it's Drew Lock that I was able to find. But, again, keep what you see and hear with a grain of salt. Because definitely they are out there, especially when it's the Giants reporting it. They're out there with an agenda. And that's fine, guys. Listen, I get it. That's part of owning a team. You want to build your team up. You want to build the hype up. You want to build the excitement up. You want the fan base energized. But when every time someone does something good, that means someone did something bad. That's what happens when you practice with teammates. So Lawrence Cager made the offensive play of the day. Was a very impressive catch from Drew Lock that actually ended up being ruled out of bounds, but the catch was supposedly amazing and just absolutely wowed everybody basically in attendance there. Overall, the offense, from what I heard, it did not look very good from various people that were there. What I am hearing is a lot of checkdowns, especially to running backs. Now, I've told you guys this before, and Rob, you've agreed with this as well. You're going to see a lot more running back catches this year, guys.
A whole bunch.
Like, we drafted a kid that was a receiver and converted a running back. We brought in Alvin Kamara's old running back coach. We got rid of Saquon Barkley, who, while he was great in the open field, didn't have the best hands in the world and definitely wasn't the best pass protector. Like, you can tell they're going to make changes to how we use that position. And I think you're going to definitely see that this upcoming season, guys. Now, also keep in mind, the practice was without pads. No contact allowed. This is basically a ceremonial day. Like, there's not, like, this is not a day where you go, oh, my God, this happened. Like, I told you, the defense did made some plays. Offense didn't look so great. That doesn't mean to give up on the offense. That doesn't mean it's going to be a long season again for the offense. This is a ceremonial event more than anything else. So we'll keep you guys posted on everything that does happen here with the training camps day by day as things do pull up there. But as always, guys, we don't like to give you half-an-hour reports on practices. It's a practice. But as things come out, that real news, like the Luminor injury we talked about earlier in the prior segment, we'll let you guys know. So that we get up to date with everything going on with the team there. Let's get into some hard knocks, though. We got some hard knocks.
Here we go.
Now, this is a whole lot
more.
The
hard knock life
for us. To me, it's a whole lot more interesting of a topic here because there's so much stuff we got to see behind the scenes, behind what it's like to be part of an NFL front office in this season here, as they're doing the off-season one for the very first time with the New York Giants, and a lot of interesting things coming out. So, first up on the docket here. Got to talk about some Daniel Jones talk here. So it's exactly how they started the show. So Daniel Jones starts up there doing some workouts and stuff. You see him doing 5-yard sprints and quick stops at that point there, which obviously is good to see first off with what he had. ACL.
Yeah, that injury.
Yeah, that's the injuries where that kind of stuff gets affected by that. It's quick stops in your knees and all, which are very difficult.
I was going to say it's a stop and go. It's like some people think it's the ability to run. It's the ability to stop and then go. The acceleration off that stop.
Exactly. Now, as he's working out, there a voiceover of Joe Shane starts off. And he says, it doesn't mean we don't have confidence in Daniel. You've missed 17 games in the last 2 years. We have been here for whatever, the neck and then the ACL. Now, you would think he's talking to Daniel Jones by the way it started off there. Then they cut to the actual film of where he was. Now, he was in his office talking to Chris Mara, the player personnel executive and obviously part of the ownership family there, he was kind of retelling the story of what he said to Daniel Jones. At one point saying, point blank, they're going to do their due diligence on the quarterbacks. They may take one, they don't know. And they wanted to be upfront and honest with him. I think he said at one point, he said about I don't want you to see him in the cafeteria. Like he wouldn't know.
Yeah, come on. I'm pretty sure that he also has some kind of cable package or some way.
No. I mean,
tweets.
As far as I didn't know they wouldn't be looking at quarterbacks considering what's happened. I mean, because keep in mind they're there for a day or two, so they're having lunch even when they're in their visits and stuff like that. So I'm not talking like he wouldn't know about them being drafted, but still, it's like. I gotta imagine Daniel Jones knew this, but what I really didn't like is why didn't we see the actual conversation? We saw the conversation, but like what would be considered in a lot of circles private conversations, though everybody knew these weren't private when they happened. We talked about that, so I'm not bashing the Giants for doing it this way. Saquon Barkley, those conversations were public. The trade discussions for Brian Burns, at least some of them were public. We talked with Elliott Wolf, the Pacers GM, about trading up. That was public. Why was Daniel Jones spared having that public? I would have loved to see his reaction. And it may not be for the reason why a lot of you guys are thinking of this. I want to see if that brings out the fight in him. I want to see if that pisses him off. Because that tells me a lot about him in this season. If he's going to have that drive from it. Because to be honest with you guys, some people, that'll set them off where they just get pissed off and you get the very best out of them. Yeah. Other people, that's going to make them cower.
Yeah. In the words of the episode, the word of the night, puts a dog in them.
Yeah. I really wanted to see how he reacted. It's really a shame we didn't get to see that. Joe Schoen did stress they weren't giving up on him, but really seemed very concerned over, as he put it, the uncertainty at the position. Now, I will say this. We've talked about this before. There's two schools of thought in the Giants fandom. There's the Jones has never gotten the right help. He could be the future. He could be great. And there's the Daniel Jones is a pile of dog poop. There's not a lot of people in the middle. Like we like to call ourselves eccentrics in that, because I do believe we are. We just don't think he's the right answer, but we do think he's a legitimate NFL quarterback.
Yeah, he's at best he's probably the next. We've got Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even say Kirk Cousins, to be honest, but I hate to say it that way. He's actually more clutch than Cousins and not nearly as good as the quarterback as Cousins, as weird as that sounds.
I was saying, but listen, he's got a long career. He's going to be a starter somewhere. He's going to get paid good money.
I don't know if he's going to be a starter after this, honestly. If he doesn't have a good season this year, he might be a backup somewhere next year.
Okay, but look at Kirk Cousins' career.
He's always been a starter.
Yeah.
Honestly, if Daniel Jones fails this year, it looks like he did last year. He's a backup somewhere next year.
Playing a couple games, getting hurt. Yeah, you're right.
No,
you don't show much for 2 years.
Did he not look, okay, correct me if I'm wrong. Did he not look bad in those games he played? Really bad.
He definitely didn't look good. What week did he get hurt?
Was it 6?
Was that? Did he play in all 6 of those games?
I can't keep track off the top of my head here. I can look up.
I guess so.
Clock, obviously.
Let's say week 2 against the Cardinals, 2 quarters, he looked fantastic. He looked all right in the quarter.
That's the only 2 quarters he looked fantastic the entire season, guys. Let's be honest. Oh,
you're not wrong. You're not wrong for saying that.
Yeah, but I'm saying, don't pick the only 2 quarters he looked good. Like, well, he had these 2 quarters.
I'm just saying, like, you're saying he looked terrible the whole season. Like, just
okay. Yes, he played the first 5 games, and then was inactive for 3, and then played again in week 9. So he played in 6 games.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, I'm just saying if he doesn't play well, it plays like he did last year, he will be back up somewhere next year. But the point I was trying to make is you got two sides of people fighting about Daniel Jones in the Giants fandom. And now they got those two sides fighting over the interpretation of this episode. They're going, oh, look, the Giants had faith in him all along. They were never going to trade for a quarterback. No one's going to look. They did all this work trying to trade up for a quarterback. And here's the reality of the scenario, guys. Here's the reality. The reality is
the coach that's right in the middle.
Point blank wanted to move up for a quarterback because he didn't have full confidence in Daniel Jones, but he had enough confidence to not give up the farm for a quarterback.
Correct. So this is his, this is his words, not, loosely said, that he pretty much said, listen, if we can't get to the top 3, we ride with Daniel. We're going to get weapons around him. We're going to get what we can do, see what we do with him. So that's saying, hey, is he the long-term answer? No. But he's also not the worst.
I'm telling you right now, they could have got the 3 if they wanted to. Point blank. They could have. They would have had to give up a ton of picks for it. We'll get to that in a little bit when we talk about. But I'm not saying it's worth it. I'm not saying it's the right move. But I'm saying they could have. They decided they'd rather have Daniel Jones and all the picks than have Drake May or Jaden Daniels, since we didn't know who was picking 2 or 3 yet. That's what they decided. So, again, the people that think that they wanted to keep Daniel Jones the entire time are wrong. They did not want to keep Daniel Jones the entire time. But the people that say they have no confidence in Daniel Jones are also wrong. There is the middle.
Correct.
That middle ground is where they're at. They had enough confidence in Daniel Jones not to give up 2 years of draft picks, basically, to get him, get him as replacement. But they didn't have enough to not at least have the conversations where if it was reasonable ask, they would have done it. It's in the middle. So.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to another part that I thought was very interesting in this whole thing here. And they start off talking about Penn State and going to Penn State's pro day. And Carmen Priscilla's there. And he's talking to Saquon Barkley, of all people. Obviously, Saquon, being a Penn State alum, was at the pro day. This is past the time period now where Barkley has been already, signed with the Eagles, so he's not a member of the Giants any longer. And Priscilla and Barkley have a little conversation. Now, keep in mind, Priscilla was on the team last year. We don't know what kind of background him and Barkley may have had from, people look like, oh, he would never coach Barkley's team before. They probably have no relationship. They might have a relationship. Keep in mind, the football world is much smaller than people like to imagine sometimes. I'm not saying he does. I'm just saying I'm not going to be quick to say he doesn't. But they had a conversation at this pro day. And Saquon was talking about the offensive line and the guys they signed with Priscilla. And Priscilla said, Runyon, the kid from Green Bay. That's what they meant when they mentioned who they signed. He said, Runyon, the kid from Green Bay. That's all he said. Kind of very short as far as that. But then he says, and Illuminor. And this is where you see him light up. Like, Priscilla's got a little bit of a reputation, guys, for being a little rough. Just a little. And we're seeing a lot more humorous side of him in Hard Knocks. We don't see the coaching side. We see the actual personality of who he really is. He says, and Illuminor is a kid that I've had. Jermaine is one of those kids. I love him truly. He's like one of those players that you say, hey, man, love you. Let's have a day today. So you can tell he really had a fond time working with Jermaine Illuminor. Keep in mind, he worked with them, his last stop in Las Vegas with the Raiders, but he also worked with them previously with the New England Patriots. This is why Rob and I said the second that we got Priscilla, said, watch Jermaine Illuminor come to the Giants. We 100%. Called it that night when they got Priscilla. And it's almost like we knew we were talking about, Rob.
It's like,
Yeah.
We saw the writing on the wall.
Exactly. Saquon then goes on to say Runyon's pretty good. Priscilla calls him smart, tough, athletic. He also, this is what I thought was very interesting, he also says that Runyon brings center flex into the room, suggesting he could go into play center if need be. I thought that was a very interesting, not even asked about kind of comment. Like, he brought that up himself. Like, it was on the top of his mind. It was something that intrigued him about Runyon. There wasn't Saquon was like, hey, can you play center too? Like, no, he was quick pop that out. That was the top of his head. So very interesting because we've talked about some of these players and coaches maybe on a short leash this year because this is year 3 for this regime. They didn't do very good last year. Back-to-back bad years is not usually very good for coaching and GM staffs. It makes you wonder, are they thinking of him as a backup plan if JMS isn't doing good or gets hurt again or, whatever the case may be? Like, is that what part of the plan is for Runyon? And I feel like that comment was made very quickly and wasn't really, I haven't heard anybody else really talking about it. Like,
yeah, it was kind of like flew under the radar pretty fast because, like, the offensive line's not a sexy talking point. You're in the trenches, like it's not that sexy.
So sexy.
Oh, so sexy. So especially when you're talking about backups and who can play as the backup. No one just thinks like, oh, these guys are going to play every snap of every down, every time they go out there, and they're going to be healthy the whole year.
Yeah.
Well, you have to think about your backups, and like you said, JMS, he was supposed to be one of the top centers coming out of this last year's draft. He's a rookie in that spot that was thrown in there with no support.
Yep.
Pretty much. And now you get a guy that could play the position. 1, you take that as he could be his backup. 2, he could take his job from him. 3, he could also be a mentor and show like, hey, kid, you're doing this. How about something like that?
Yeah, he can, but I don't know. I wonder about
you also,
him,
well, you don't really take people in as, usually a mentorship, but there's a lot of moving parts in his offensive line now with guys who can play multiple positions. So, like, it is also more of a security blanket of if someone goes down, do we have to call up a guy off the couch to be a starter?
That'd be a good thing not to do. Now, I will say this. I did look up to see as far as him playing center. Apparently, he played snaps at center in the preseason opener for the Packers back in 2013. So, which is obviously last year. So you're talking he has done it within the last year, that means. So interesting. Like I said, I think that kind of flew under the radar a little bit because no one really talked about him as a potential center, but it's interesting. So,
yeah.
Saquon, though, for his part, was very quick to say nice things about John Michael Schmitz. I give him credit for that because the guys aren't teammates anymore. He has no need to, play that kind of game. But he did. He said that John Michael Schmitz has leadership quality, which Priscilla did quickly agree. So I'm not suggesting that John Runyon is brought in to replace JMS. That'd be ridiculous. They obviously want JMS to pan out. But it's interesting that he's there as an option if either he gets hurt again or doesn't pan out. I just think that's kind of interesting that was brought up so quickly, the center part for him there. So, we talk a lot about the upgrades in the offensive line. We kind of had Schlappman as kind of the backup center. Maybe John Runyon Jr. is actually the backup center. Or maybe it's just in the back of his mind, we have him in a pinch if we need it. Like, I don't know which way it is. He didn't elaborate past that. But I just thought it was interesting you brought that up that quickly.
Yeah.
So, let's talk about the real reason the Giants were at the Penn State Pro Day, though. And it's not to talk to Saquon about offensive linemen. It was to look at this guy, probably. Theo Johnson. Not to be confused with Theo Huxtable. And, he was a guy that a lot of scouts and, college football guys and draft analysts and, all the talking heads on TV were very mixed on. Because he's kind of that guy that was seen kind of like a project. Like all the physical tools you could possibly want. Not necessarily the best outcome on the football field, though, necessarily. Wasn't bad in Penn State. I'm not bashing him in that regard. But he wasn't a guy that blew the top off with numbers. He definitely wasn't that guy in any way, shape, or form. So he's an interesting one to look at what he does, because let's be honest, if he looks really good, you go, what did Penn State do wrong? Which we've asked about that with some players in general. But the Giants staff said that he will be the second tight end taken off the board, which I thought was interesting. So Ben Sinnott was actually the second one taken off the board by the Commanders. And our second best, remember, we had our picks there. We had our rankings. was Jatavian Sanders of Texas, who went to the Panthers. So I thought it was very interesting that they thought, like, they weren't even like, hey, we think he's the second best tight end. They said, no, he'll be the second tight end taken off the board, is what they said. So obviously that means they talked to other people who really thought very high of Theo Johnson there. They also were quick to say he is checking every box and called him a prototype, which I thought was interesting because that just solidifies what we said a minute ago. He has all the physical tools. He has the perfect size. He's got every single thing you could possibly want in a prospect, except the numbers on the field. So I'm curious to see what they see, because I feel like if you're high on him when he shows these abilities in college, you must think Penn State is using him wrong. You must think Penn State is teaching him something wrong. Like, there's got to be some way, shape, or form that you're blaming Penn State for this debacle. Because here's a guy who is not just the prototype for, tight ends, but a guy who literally mimics some of the best tight ends athleticism-wise. Jimmy Graham and him, we talked about him. Their combine numbers were almost identical. So,
yeah,
kind of curious to see what goes on forward. And I love to see, maybe we'll have to get somebody as a Penn State guy later on the show once the season starts to see if they can compare what he did at Penn State compared to what the Giants have been doing. Because I'm curious what the difference in those two things is going to be. Because I really think that's got to be where the Giants are at. All right. Before we get to the next topic, guys, for those who may have missed the last episode, we're doing a contest.
Ooh.
Oh, yes, we're doing a contest. So if you haven't signed up for the contest yet, sign up for the contest. It's very simple. Here's how you do it.
Enter to win a Daniel Jones signed jersey. Simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@2giantgoofballs, and email a screenshot to 2giantgoofballs@mail.com to enter. Only one submission allowed per subscriber. Monthly subscribers at buymeacoffee.com/2giantgoofballs will get an additional 2 entries. Contest ends when the channel reaches 1,000 subscribers. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. This contest is not affiliated with the NFL, New York Giants, Daniel Jones, or any other person or company besides the 2 Giant Goofball podcast. Good luck to everyone.
All right, guys. So, yeah, that's simple. If you want a Daniel Jones certified autographed jersey, all you got to do is subscribe to the YouTube channel, send us an email with a screenshot of it. If you're also part of the buymeacoffee.com/2giantgoofballs group there, let us know that in the email as well. So you get one entry automatically by subscribing. You get 2 additional for a total of 3 if you are subscribing as well in the buymeacoffee.com/2giantgoofballs. So, all right, guys, let's get to the next topic here. Next up, we got to talk about the LSU Pro Day. They had a segment on that. And listen, they had a segment also on the Notre Dame one. We'll mention that real quick, but
Yep.
it was quick, it was brief, and they didn't even talk about Joe Alt really, who was the main guy that people were there to see. So let's be honest, they weren't gonna get another tackle. I know some people wanted it, but they weren't gonna get another tackle. Like,
That'd be silly.
So here's basically what happened during the segment they had on the LSU Pro Day. First off, it starts with Brian Daboll talking about Neighbors in a quote that's already been given like 10,000 times prior to the episode on all the previews. He said, that guy's a stud on tape. Neighbors got a little dog in him, which he's right. Listen, you can't watch the tape and watch the film and see what he did this last year in college and not be impressed. If you are, then kudos. You are not easily impressed. You have a very, very high bar. You set the bar very high. So
beat chin ups off your bar in no time.
Yes. But yeah, Shane then mentions the fact that he may be there at 6. Spoiler alert, he was. Most of the segment was Neighbors basically making catches and them doing slow-mo shots of him or him joking around with all the other guys at the LSU Pro Day, which was honestly, I thought a missed opportunity. I really did. Like, I would have loved to see more feedback on the performance, more talk from them of what they thought of him as a player, more on Jaden Daniels, who, again, we didn't know if we were going to have a chance to trade down and potentially get a quarterback at that time when that was shot. It'd been nice to get a little bit feedback and see some stuff from Jane Daniels there. Or Brian Thomas, who was one of the top wide receivers in the draft as well. Like, what happened if, hypothetically, Neighbors, Odunze, all these guys were taken early at that point. Let's say if it went quarterback, then wide receiver, and we're only stuck with one option for wide receiver, and we didn't like that option, we might have traded down and go with a guy like Brian Thomas later on in that first round. I just feel like it was a missed opportunity on their end, and I think maybe not all people would have enjoyed that as much as we would, because we kind of did a ton of work on the draft and want to see if they thought the same things we thought, but I just thought it was a little odd. I thought it was a wasted opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, they kept it to like the casual fan, not like the goofball fans out there that really do the homework and dive into each player. So like,
yeah,
I get it to the point, but they did have like a nice little part of it where they talked about, let's go trade up, let's trade down, let's see what happens. What are we going to piece, and who do you think they're going to piece with? So it was
yeah, but that was later on. That wasn't even pro day. Like, that's what I'm saying. I just think the pro day was a wasted opportunity. It really was.
It really was.
So let's get into a nice segment here where we can officially call off the police. We can call up the search dogs. We can end the APB alert for one Mike Kafka, who has finally appeared on Hard Knocks. It took episode 4. We're more than halfway through now of the entire show. I think it's only like 5 or 6 episodes they're doing. I don't know if next week's the last one or not. But either way, you've had so much time with Shane Bowen. Obviously, he got signed in the offseason, part of it. But so much time with Shane Bowen. Hell, Carmine Priscillo got more of a spot on Hard Knocks than Mike Kafka has.
Yeah.
Jerome Henderson has been spotted more than Mike Kafka on Hard Knocks. Like, yeah. So,
not a good look.
The fact that he hasn't been on there yet is a lot of people have been kind of speculating about that, about whether or not that's a sign of issues with him and the organization. And we have talked about it before ourselves. I do think it is. Honestly, I feel like Mike Kafka cannot wait for that contract to run out. I still think that. And I think that Dable was hoping that in a year with him, he can kind of smooth things over a little bit. It's a long time. I'm not so sure. I see Kafka and I see a man who's like hijacked at his job. That's what I see. That's the body language he gives off.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's Marshawn Lynch. He's here so he doesn't get fined. That's
pretty much. It's I love what I do. I just don't love who I do it for.
Exactly. Like, I'm not saying exactly. You're 100% right there. I'm not saying he hates football. He doesn't want to be a coach anymore. Like, I think that's the case. Hell, he wants to be a head coach. Let's be honest. But they start off this little segment there with Joe Shane along with quarterback coach Shea Turney, who's in a meeting there with Kafka. They basically going to be summing up things already talked about before the segment. They say they're okay at receiver, but they wouldn't be hurt to potentially add another big name there to that group. He's then shown a couple of things in the background. He was in the wide receivers meeting they had that we'll talk about, next with Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, and Rome Odunze in a meeting that was led by Mike Rowe. So you're talking about a couple of appearances he's now made this episode, but yeah, guys, this is supposed to be the face of the offense.
Yeah.
I just, no. Wonder if Kafka was in the background. Like, I really don't want to be in this damn show, guys. I really want to be
I'm
here.
on here so I get fine.
I don't even be here in general, let alone on camera.
Yeah.
And if you look at the photo we had in the very beginning, again, I've mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again. It was actually one of the photos was him at the East-West Shrine Bowl where he was a coach. And the Giants in episode 1 had the East-West Shrine Bowl in there. And they didn't show Mike Kafka, even though he was a coach and he's their OC. Don't tell me that's a good relationship. Don't tell me everything's fine.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I ain't buying it. And I even before the show, I didn't buy it because of the fact that Mike Kafka, by all accounts, wanted to interview for the offensive coordinator job in Seattle. Why would he want to go for a lateral move?
Yeah.
So they gave him a little more money. They gave him a title of assistant head coach, which you would think assistant head coach should be around Dable a lot. Dable's been all over the show. Mike Kafka has not. Just saying, I'm not buying it. The relationship's not good. So
it's been the Shane Dable show.
It 100% is what that's been. I mean, I love it when Dable just walks in his room, lays down on his couch, and just kicks up his feet on the coffee table like he owns the place. It's just funny.
Pretty much.
I don't know why it is. It just is to me.
I just want to see the man light a cigar and just scratch his junk like Al Bundy.
He probably does. Does. Let's get into a fun little segment that they had on this, which is they had all three wide receivers in for a visit at the same time. Like, talk about putting a little bit of pressure on these three. So they had, again, Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, and Marvin Harrison Jr. all in the Giants facility at once there. Joe Shane called all three of them studs, and he's not wrong. Like, these, I think these three, to me, are all going to be successful in the league. I do think you might wait a little bit for Rome Odunze to be successful because of where he went. He's going to be paired up with a rookie quarterback with two other great receivers already. But I do think that all three of those are going to be legit receivers in this league for a while to go. But as we said earlier, they're in a meeting run by wide receiver coach Mike Rowe as he asked them questions, basically go ahead and test their football IQ. Again, offensive coordinator Mike Kafka was seen in the background. Again, they didn't mention him. They didn't mention he was in that room, but you could see him in the background. He's got that chrome dome. It's a little difficult not to spot him, you know. There was another Giants staffer also in the background. I don't know who he was. So if anybody does and wants to go ahead and pop that into the comments there, feel free. We definitely, don't mind people giving us enlightenment on that. I don't pretend to know who the assistant wide receivers coach, whatever the hell this guy's position was there. But he was the bearded guy in the background with the Giants gear on. Like I said, kind of curious if anybody happens to know who that was. Anyway, in a meeting with Dable and Shane, Odunze asked them what they're looking for character-wise in the locker room. Dable is very quick to say he likes the character of the team. Was very quick. Like the second that question was done, which Odunze kind of
didn't finish.
Was kind of a longer question because he wasn't quite sure how to word it. You can tell, but you're right. He almost didn't finish the question. Dable was like, "Yep, I love the character of the team."
Yeah,
it was
pretty much like that. It's like, "Yep."
Yeah. And they're very quick to say that. They're also very quick to say how important character was to them and the players they get. Now, I will say this: they haven't seen a lot of issues with the Giants players off the field.
No,
you really haven't. So, not that it's a regular thing to see, but you do see other teams. Look at you, Cowboys.
Long-time Raiders.
I actually saw a list of like the top most arrests.
Raiders.
And it was the Browns were number one actually.
That makes sense
too. And I don't even know if Deshaun Watson was ever arrested, so I don't know if that counts for what deal is. He was technically a Texan back then, and the Texans had the least number of arrests. But yeah, both the Giants and the Eagles were, I know, in the latter half of that. I can't remember where the Commanders were off top, man. I think they were kind of middle of the pack. But yeah, the Cowboys were definitely pretty high up. Not as high as you would think, but they were definitely higher. Anyway. In another room, assistant GM Brandon Brown asked about relocation with Marvin Harrison Jr., who quickly says he'd go relocate to whatever city he plays for. Which I was kind of shocked that's a question, but I was thinking about it. And there are players you do hear about that will rent an apartment during the season, and they have a house somewhere else. And I think a lot of that's more younger players that don't have families, stuff like that, or sometimes it's older players that do have families, they don't want to uproot them. It's not kind of the middle range, so to speak. It's usually those guys on one of the two spectrums there. But that's an interesting question. That's what I love about this Hard Knocks. Like, I would never think to even ask about something like that. I would just assume they would. But no, they don't. That's a dangerous thing to assume.
Yes. Yeah. It's sounds like any civil service job you apply for. Like, if you're almost frowned upon if you're not living in that municipality. of where
I'll
you're
tell you
trying
though,
to go.
there are plenty of cities that if I was an NFL player, I would not want to live in.
You're telling me you wouldn't want to live in New Orleans?
Actually, I would probably enjoy living in New Orleans, but I would not spend a lot of time on Bourbon Street. Great food,
I was gonna
great
say.
people, but Bourbon Street is a shit show. I did love the food though. But like, imagine being like drafted by Minnesota. Like, do you really want to live in Minnesota
No.
in the middle of winter? I'm good. Like I said, it's the interesting ins and outs that you don't necessarily think of in these things that I do love. But yeah, then they go to Shane and Dable are in a meeting with neighbors. Dable asks him how he deals with things when they aren't going as he envisioned. He asked him to be straight and admits he has a hot temper. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Who would have thought Dable has a bad temper? You only see him cursing off the refs every single game. A neighbor's response says, yeah, I got a hot temper, but it's not like I got a temper in a bad way. Which I'm not sure how the good way is at that point. I never see somebody go, oh, thank God I have this temper. If I didn't have this temper, I don't know what would happen.
Oh, Jesus, temper. It's like so mild. You guys would never notice how pissed off I am right now.
Yeah, like this is a gift and a blessing to have this bad temper.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
This temper just makes me want to go to church.
I honestly think his mentality is more I am what I am. I don't think he just wanted to say it that way, but I think that's what he meant by that. Is kind of more that.
Well, between what we've seen in Hard Knocks, what he's posted on Twitter, and what we've seen out, in his public appearance, like this is what you got. Like, yep. And it's not a bad thing from what I've seen. Like, does he make the smartest decisions in this big market area without anything on? You could argue that, but I mean, we've argued about different things that he's done. Yeah. He said some bonehead things, but who hasn't at 20 years old made a boneheaded comment?
If he's just saying boneheaded things at 24, you're good. You're 20 years old. I mean, you're good to
20.
go. Because I mean, I've said all kinds and did all kinds of stupid things at 20. That's for damn sure. So yeah, but there's a little bit of back and forth now between Dable and neighbors, and then Shane says that's the thing that just makes you great. You also want to make sure it's not a distraction, affect anything negatively. I thought that was interesting because this tells me the Giants did have a little bit of concern with Neighbors' personality, I think. They asked him a similar question during the combine interview as well. It obviously wasn't a deal breaker for them. I think they just want to kind of seem to know a better idea of his personality and what they might have to do things a little different to kind of deal with that personality. And you do that for special talents. You do that.
That was a good way to put it. Like what you have to do for him a little differently, because like any coach out there, like most managers out there know, any good manager, I should say, knows. Like any good coach knows, there's different personalities that can't be taught the same way. That you may have to go around and I don't want to say walk in eggshells because that's not the right thing. But you may have to coach them. You may have to discipline them. You may have to show them how to motivate them in different ways than other people. Not to say they're more or less talented, but different people are motivated by different things.
Yes. And I feel like everybody's worked with a guy like that at one point in their life where they've gone, this guy's a complete jerk at times. And he's not a bad guy. It's just the stress gets him the job, whatever the case may be. We've all worked with somebody.
But he's a hell of a worker.
But yeah, he's a hell of a worker, and he does things that a lot of other people can't do. So they keep him around. And I'm not saying Neighbors to that extent. We don't know him very well, obviously, because he hasn't been a Giant for very long. We don't know him personally either. So I'm not trying to put that out there either as like the gospel truth kind of thing. But there's a possibility they were a little concerned about that kind of scenario.
Yeah.
So anyway, Shane continues to say, I think that's what's going to make you great because you're a dog. It's just channeling that when you do get to that point. And they brought up other guys that they've been around. Like Shane mentioned, he was around Steve Smith, obviously. I mentioned them being dogs. So obviously, they're not scared of a wide receiver with personality. They're not scared with a wide receiver with that dog mentality. I think they just want to make sure it's dog and not rabid dog.
or douche dog.
Sounds like a Cartoon Network show. On this season of Douche Dog.
Oh man, I'm drying out.
It's kind of like Dog the Bounty Hunter. He's kind of a douche.
A little bit.
That haircut was weird. Anyway, the segment then goes back to the meetings with Groh, but he's congratulating all three on having a great meeting. To be honest, it kind of seemed a little weird the way he was like, "Oh, great meeting, guys!" Like, and again, I think we got to remember sometimes that these guys are on camera. They know they're on camera, and they're probably a little nervous in that part. You know, especially a guy who's a wide receivers coach. Like he gets interviewed, but he's on camera. He's not on ESPN Sports Center and that kind of stuff. You know, like he knows he's going to be a beat reporter occasionally, and that's it.
Yeah, occasionally he's going to show on Fox. You know, every once in a while making a call or.
Yeah,
off to the side.
Yeah,
yeah.
Was interesting that was right after that they cut to John Mara asking Groh which receiver he would take, and he says he would take Neighbors. He didn't hesitate. He was pretty quick to say that. I thought that was kind of interesting. Part of me made me wonder if they actually went ahead and recorded that scene 3 times just in case, or like, hey, listen, we talked about it before, like. We knew going into this draft, there were people that had Neighbors as their top receiver. And most people had Marvin Harrison Jr., but there were some people who had Neighbors as the top. And we worded it as Neighbors has the highest ceiling, Harrison has the highest floor. Like Harrison's more of the sure thing. But Neighbors there's something special about this kid. There really is. Like, and I really think he had a better year last year than Harrison did. So
yeah, what was on the table? Yeah, it's fair to say. Like we've talked about that quite a few times.
Again, he had a better quarterback. He had a back and better second receiver. So it's not all like it was all him, and that's what the case may be there. But like I said, it was interesting that Groh said that, and then that's who we end up getting. So he's probably happier than a pig in shit on draft day. That's for damn sure. So let's get into the other group that we got to see some meetings with there, and that's the QBs. The QBs came into East Rutherford. There they are, the big 3 that we got to see on this. Drake May, North Carolina, Jaden Daniels at LSU, and J.J. McCarthy out of Michigan. Now, Caleb Williams was not a part of this. And it seemed pretty obvious early on that the Giants knew they had not a shot in hell of getting Caleb Williams. The Bears were not giving up that pick. The Bears were not going to shy away from Caleb Williams. Like, that was pretty obvious from the get-go. So that's why he wasn't a part of that. They did the one combine interview with him, but that was probably the extent of their meetings. So they even said on the thing, that little intro, they said right then and there, Bears are going to take Caleb Williams number 1, and so they won't trade. They said that the Commanders would never make a move within the division, and then the Patriots are talked about as a possible trade partner. Assistant GM Brandon Brown talks about not wanting to be so high next year. Preaching to the choir. We're tired of being a high draft pick ourselves.
Yeah.
But then they show J.J. McCarthy and Drake May in a meeting room with the whiteboard. I got to say, I thought J.J. McCarthy was not visible in this episode a lot at all. And that seemed to kind of solidify what you and I talked about during the draft season, where we thought the whole thing was a smokescreen. I think it's pretty obvious that was a smokescreen.
Smokescreen.
Because you saw him on camera once or twice. He came in for a visit, but you really didn't see a lot of J.J. McCarthy. You didn't hear them talking even a lot about J.J. McCarthy.
No.
I really think that was them doing their homework. Now, I will say this. What I thought was very interesting is, besides when they had a little montage about them flying around the country to see people, you saw them briefly talking to Michael Penix Jr. Otherwise, there was no Penix in this whole thing.
Were we wrong? Were the Goofs wrong?
Well, listen, I'm not saying we were wrong because we never said the Giants would target Michael Penix Jr. What I said is he was a highly ranked quarterback for me, and I thought he's going to be good in the NFL. So I think we're still safe in what we said.
Well,
we were hoping the Giants were interested because we liked him. But we'll see what happens in the Falcons in the next 7 years when he finally gets a chance to start at the age of 35.
That's what I say. Shortest, longest career ever.
Exactly. Anyway, they then cut to Jaden Daniels having a meeting with Shane and Dable in Shane's office. Dable asked him multiple times if he wanted to be the quarterback for the New York Giants, and he says yes each time. Dable talks about it important to him that he wants to have people that want to be there, which makes sense, obviously, especially when they're drafting someone and they don't necessarily get to choose where they want to go. You don't want to draft somebody who doesn't really want to be there.
No.
It's not the best scenario. Ask Eli Manning about him in San Diego. We'll get to that a little bit later.
San Diego.
But yeah, so he then asked him if he had his plays, and Daniel says he'll draw all three of the plays he had on the whiteboard. So basically, it seems that the quarterbacks, basically what we've gathered of this episode here, the quarterbacks were given multiple plays from either the offense or plays that they just made up for this occasion, and gave them to the three quarterbacks and asked them to be ready to basically write it down on the whiteboard when they got there and discuss the play and discuss who is who and what their responsibilities are and what they're going to do, basically. So it was interesting. And I wonder how far in advance they were given that. Was that morning? Did they give a piece of paper and say, here you go, we'll talk about this in a couple hours? Or did they email it like a week beforehand? Like, I just don't know that part of it. I'm kind of curious on that. But it's a nice way of showing, A, their memory skills, B, their understanding of football plays. You know, it's a nice way of doing it. And I wonder if all teams do it. Again, that's part of the fun of the show, is we're getting to see stuff we don't usually get to see.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, did any of you all have any idea what happens during a top 30 visit with the quarterback? Let's be honest. We've never been in the room for one. We've never seen one. It's an interesting thing to see there at that point. But yeah, then it cuts to a meeting in the draft room, and Shane asked Dable if he would trade up for Jaden Daniels, and Dable pretty quickly to say yes. Then it cuts and moves over to Drake May showing his cadence in the meeting room there as he snaps the ball. Then back to the meeting, and Mike Kafka makes a slight appearance there and calls May a guy you can believe in. So Shane then says in the meeting that they've invested in Daniel Jones and hopefully the line can stay healthy, but that the team is missing a number one wide receiver. And I kind of get the vibe that, like, they're okay. They were okay with May or Daniels, but they didn't really have any interest in McCarthy. Because you notice that they didn't ask, would you want to take McCarthy at 6 if he's available? That never came up this entire show.
No.
Not once did that question get asked. I think they were okay with either one. I think, people thought that, like, there was a bromance going on between Brian Dable and Drake May at the Combine. And we talked about Jaden Daniels didn't necessarily look the best at that Combine interview. But Dable seemed to like him some Jaden Daniels in that. He definitely did. Now, they didn't ask the question if you would trade it for Drake May. I would have been curious if they asked that question as a follow-up. I would have loved to see the answer in that, because I love to see where their hierarchy of these quarterbacks were. But it was pretty obvious that Drake May, Jaden Daniels, both those they were okay with, but they weren't okay with anybody else past that point. Brian Dable then pulls out his cell phone at that point. Basically talks about the last few years, 5 of the 8 quarterbacks taken in the first round were busts. Then they talk all about quarterback busts, and they list all the quarterbacks in the last decade in the first, and most of them were busts. They labeled them the bust red and the winds blue. Interesting, they labeled Daniel Jones blue. If you actually watched that thing and looked, I looked because I saw him on the list, and I was curious to see what color they give him. And I'm wondering, is it they're more like talking about, hey, this guy's still with the same team who drafted him, and you could give him that, but I don't know if you would, if it's safe to say that Daniel Jones is a winning draft pick at this point.
Yeah. You could also teeter the line. You could also play devil's advocate because he's.
Oh, listen, we can always play devil's advocate, But if the queen of ball should be the king, like it is what it is at this point. There are quarterbacks who have succeeded. We talked about it before. Joe Burrow, bad offensive line, he still succeeds. But like I said, I just look at that and go, I thought it was interesting they did that. But yeah, if you look at that list, they were like all red. It was like a whole bunch of red guys, a whole bunch of red.
Yeah.
Seeing
red again
hits back home to the fact that you don't have to go ahead and move up for a quarterback if you don't believe in a quarterback. That's a dumb move to make. It's just not there. Sometimes, and you just don't want to go ahead and fight for it. If you look at some of the best guys out there, Lamar Jackson was I believe the last pick in the first round. Josh Allen was like the last quarterback. It was like the third quarterback taken in that draft. Dak Prescott, I hate to say it this way, but he's not a bad quarterback, guys. Not a great one. He can't win big games, but he's not a bad quarterback. Let's be honest, we would take him over Daniel Jones in a heartbeat. 4th round pick. Jalen Hurts, 2nd round pick. And I'm not a huge fan of him. I know a lot of other people are. Brock Purdy, 7th round pick. Kirk Cousins, I believe, was a 4th round pick. Geno Smith was a 2nd round pick. Derek Carr was a 2nd round pick. Just saying, like, you don't necessarily have to go ahead and get a top 10 pick to get a good quarterback. So that's what they were talking about. And they kind of seem to be nervous about if you give up all these picks for one of these guys and they don't pan out. That's not going to be good for your franchise long term.
No, not at all.
Yeah. All this quarterback talk, though, apparently brought the nostalgia out in John Mara. John Mara took a little trip down memory lane in this episode.
Memories.
Nothing but sweet memories. And they went back to 2004 when, of course, the Giants made probably the most historic trade in their franchise's history when they went ahead and traded for Eli Manning. And, I think John Mara, just by the way he was talking, was kind of on the idea of they might be on the cusp of making a trade. So that's an interesting side note to kind of put in there as well. Like,
it sounded like it.
Like, he thought they might pull off a trade, I think, by the way he was talking. Not saying they were definitely going to, not saying that they thought it was a foregone conclusion, but I definitely think he thought it was a good possibility.
Or hoping.
Yeah. But Mara was saying that, that Eli was a guy that Ernie Accorsi, their former GM, was sold on. And talked about how Eli supporting Cass wasn't exactly the greatest. He talked about how a big factor for them was Eli playing in the SEC, while Ben Roethlisberger there, Big Ben, came from a smaller school. It's interesting because even all these years later, to hear the facts of how that trade kind of went down to a degree was interesting because the Giants could have stayed there at pick, was it 7, I think we had originally? 4.
Yes.
Was it 4? Pick 4. It was pick 4, actually. Pick 7 is where Big Ben went to with the Steelers. Pick 4 is what we had. So, the Giants could have stood there, though, and taken Big Ben. That's the guy they wanted if they couldn't trade up for Eli, by all accounts. And that obviously what he said in those comments kind of solidified it because they didn't mention, where Phillip Rivers played, which obviously wasn't a big school either.
It's crazy to think that Big Ben could have been a Giant. That would have been absolutely nuts.
He was close. It would have been a very sad day for all the women in New York City. But he was this close to being a New York Giant if that trade hadn't gone down. And it's just interesting, I said, to see these guys going back and talking about this story of how that went down, because we've talked about with more current stuff. Sometimes you don't learn until years later what went down and caused a trade, or what went down and caused a move to be made, or what the opinion and the thought process was. But it was pretty obvious by the way he was talking. Ernie Accorsi was dead set, no matter what it took, to get Eli Manning in the Giants. I remember that trade when it went down, and a lot of people thought the Giants gave up way too much to get him. Way too much. it seems like basically whatever they had to give up, they were going to give it up, based on the way that talk was. Like they just had their conviction, and conviction was a word you heard a lot of talk about there. Conviction on the person you're picking. If you're convinced this is that guy, go get that guy. So, but then we got the talk of the first round trades. There was a lot of trade scenarios talking about there. Joe Schoen does not look happy on that phone call. I don't even know what phone call that was. I took that picture from, for those watching the video. I think it was actually the Saquon talk, because he did not look happy at all. Just did not. But yeah, Mara is talking to Schoen at the beginning, and that's what he said. He said, you have to trust your convictions. And I got to give credit to John Mara, because he didn't meddle, at least in that conversation. It was very much like, listen, if you got your conviction, go for it. If you don't, then don't feel like you have to do this. That, I thought, as an owner, was just an excellent, excellent way of handling that situation. And we've talked bad about John Mara before. The whole medium Coke fiasco, and, how he seemed to want to meddle with the Barkley situation there. I thought, if that's the honest advice he kept giving Schoen, because who knows what happened in other conversations, I thought that was very sound advice from a guy that, listen, love him or hate him, John Mara has been in football since the day he was born. He's seen a lot. So, anyway, Schoen said he didn't want to give up a historic haul to move up. He then calls Elliot Wolf of the Patriots. Wolf said they're happy sitting where they are. Everybody pretty much knew that the Patriots probably going to take a quarterback. He did give a little bit of wiggle room, though, to him, saying, well, maybe if you offered us a 1, 2, and 3 this year and a 1 and 2 next. But then said he was also exaggerating when he suggested that. Schoen said a 1 this year, 1 next, and something else. Wolf said he'd sit back, if that kind of offer, and just pick where they're at. So, there was definitely conversations. Again, if you think that they didn't want to trade, to go ahead and go to quarterback, you're kidding yourself. Absolutely kidding yourself. But they weren't willing to give up everything for him. So I guess the question comes to be is, should Schoen have given up a historical haul? Like, should he given everything up for a quarterback? And, or was he right to sit there? And exactly. I think people are kind of already starting to argue this. Like, oh, Joe Schoen should have pulled the trigger. Joe Schoen should have done this. Blah, 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 blah. Like, we don't know. We don't know yet, guys. I want to wonder if these people that wanted Drake May so bad, because let's be honest, Drake May is who you would have gotten at number 3. For the people that wanted Drake May so bad, did you also want, to go ahead and get prior ones that were busts as well? I feel like there was a big movement amongst Giants fans just a couple of years ago to get Malik Willis, who is now listed as a 3rd quarterback for the Titans, because that's how bad he's been. Like, you don't just throw everything, including the kitchen sink, at that position and hope to eventually get it right. Because when you do that, you don't have the tools around to help a young quarterback succeed. Now, I admit what John Mara said is 100% correct, though. If you have your conviction, like, if you think Drake May is going to be hoisting the Super Bowl trophy in the Giants uniform if he goes there, then yes, you go ahead and give up anything you had to get to him. I don't know about y'all, but I didn't have that conviction on him.
Yeah.
Now, weirdly enough, I do have that conviction with Jaden Daniels. And I hate to say that because he's the Commander. I have that conviction with him. Now, the Commanders are effing up probably. And he'll probably have a bad career now because of where he went.
It's a very good possibility, but it's also a new team.
Free him into the ground.
Yeah.
Just saying. That's what the Commanders have that luck. So, but yeah, he's the guy I would have traded up for if he was available. And this conversation was then had. I'm like, yeah, do it. Because he even said he's exaggerating. He wasn't saying a 1, 2, and 3 this year and a 1 and 2 next. But if you could have got it for maybe a 1 and 3 this year and a 1 and 2 next, I probably would have said do it for Jaden Daniels. Maybe I'm crazy, but not for Drake May. I think some of the hype is a little overblown there. Anyway, that call basically ended any chances of them moving up to number 3. He then said he hoped that they called the Cardinals, but since they were set where they were and didn't want to risk missing out on Marvin Harrison Jr. He then said he hoped the Chargers would go to tackle at number 5. He said that he thought Neighbors was possibly in the mix there as well. The suggestion is made then that if Neighbors goes to the Chargers, to call up the Titans about moving down. The show didn't suggest, but we can imagine that it was probably for them to guarantee they got whatever tackle they wanted. Because in that scenario, Joe Alt was still available. J.C. Latham's who they ended up taking from Alabama, who was the second best tackle in the draft. So that might have intrigued them. Maybe we could have got an extra pick out of them and still gotten whoever we wanted because they weren't going to pick a receiver. Then it was basically a montage of calls made by Joe Shane. Gotta love a good montage. Who doesn't love a good montage?
You gotta have a montage. Montage.
I think we've said the word montage at least 10 times per episode during Hard Knocks. They show a lot of montages.
Because you gotta have a montage.
Now, here was the interesting thing. We said it a minute ago that they said on the show that the Cardinals were going to be set to stay where they're at because they wanted to go ahead and get Marvin Harrison Jr. But then afterwards, they kind of snuck it in. I didn't hear a lot of people talking about this either on the Twitterverse and all. But Joe Shane said after that, he said, we have a deal in place kinda with Arizona. That's what he said. Now, there was all kinds of weird rumors going around, as there is every draft, that maybe somebody would take Marvin Harrison Jr. early on. Maybe if the Patriots are sitting at 3 and they don't like the quarterback that's left, they take Marvin Harrison Jr. and get a quarterback another time. There's all these kind of talks about that. I got to think that was the deal. Basically, okay, if one of these guys take Marvin Harrison Jr., the quarterback's still available, we will trade with you. And I think that's what the trade was. How different would that have been? We would have had a quarterback and not have Malik Neighbors, but also lost some extra draft picks potentially. But I can't imagine we'd have to give up the farm for him because, in that scenario, they wanted Marvin Harrison Jr. anyway. That's they would have gotten Malik Neighbors, who they probably would have picked as the backup because they needed a wide receiver really badly. Like I said, I would have loved to hear what that conversation was to verify if we're right on that and to see what the Cardinals would have expected in return to move down that 2 spots, because that's not a huge jump.
Yeah.
So, anyway, he said, if it's Marv or Neighbors, turn the card in. So that's what they determined. He also mentioned, Joe Shane did, that the Bears were willing to move up to number 6. So interesting, I thought, because if it's Marv or Neighbors, turn the card in. He didn't say Rome. He didn't say Odunze. Didn't seem to like them some Rome. I like Rome.
Really not.
And I've heard people talk about, hey, he's not much a fit at the offense, whatever. Listen, you got a great player. You make him fit the damn offense. You fit the offense around him.
100%. I
think Rome Odunze is that kind of player. I really do think. I think he's going to be very good this league. I don't disagree with them in their order. Marvin Harrison Jr. probably been number 1, Neighbors number 2, and Odunze number 3. I don't disagree on the order, but I would not have been pissed off if we got Rome Odunze at number 6. Assuming that Neighbors and Harrison were both gone and the quarterbacks were gone. I would not have been upset. I'd have been perfectly fine with that. So, but interesting though, all the different trade talks, there was so many different talks about that kind of stuff. They even showed the preview of next week's episode, which seemed like going to be the draft itself. And during that, they kind of hinted at the fact that the Jets try to move up with the Giants as well, which would be interesting. A inter-New York trade there like that. But yeah, very interesting, guys. So let's get into, we got one more segment there. So we lose Rob here temporarily. He's having a little internet issues tonight. Let's go into our last segment here. And it's a quick one here. but I thought it was kind of interesting. So Dable and Shane are talking, and Dable brings up the fact, hey, I called up Nick Saban, talked to him about what what players gave them issues the last few years that are in this draft, and he gave two names. He gave two names there. The two names he gave were Malik Neighbors, and he said Malik Neighbors just went off on them, and then Brock Bowers. Now, Brock Bowers is not a guy that was really put often in the circles of the New York Giants that are very often during draft time. But they had mentioned on the show that if Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, and the three top quarterbacks are all gone by the time the Giants pick, that their plan was to trade back. They even said so much about trading back with, like I said, the Titans, the Bears. That the plan was to trade back and try to get either Rome Odunze or Brock Bowers. You got to wonder at this whole Brock Bowers thing is because of that conversation with Saban, and to see how much weight his word carries. Because listen, Nick Saban, guys, legendary coach, absolutely legendary, and I still think the whole money in the college football is probably why I left, because it leveled the playing field a little bit. Whatever tricks they were probably doing in Alabama, but he's seen these guys up close. And that's a pretty impressive, a little feather in the cap there for Brock Bowers that Nick Saban listed him as that. I also thought it was interesting that Jayden Daniels was not on that list. You would think, if you're impressed by Malik Neighbors, you would think you're also probably impressed by Jayden Daniels, but no, that's who Nick Saban had listed at that point there. So, oops, I hit wrong buttons. You're trying to get wrong. It's like kaleidoscope real quick. So yeah, we end up getting the number one player that Nick Saban listed as the guy who gave him fits in the last couple of years, though. So that's a great thing to have. I'm excited for Neighbors, obviously, this year. I'm excited to see what he does overall. I think he's going to be potentially one of the best receivers to ever play for the New York Giants when his career is up. It's just a matter of how long he's here.
It's best that he's got the potential.
He's got the potential.
Hands
You'll
down.
never say bona fide, definite, mark it, book it, that kind of thing. But he's got that potential. If he's as good as I think he is, then he's going to be the guy that's in that conversation with Toomer and OBJ as one of the best Giants ever.
Now, if you could put those two careers together.
Yeah. If you could put the explosiveness to OBJ with the longevity and the teammateness, if that's the word, teammateness of Amani Toomer.
Teaminess.
Sign me up. Sign me up. So, all righty, guys. You know what? I can't believe Rob didn't stop me, but we haven't paid the bills yet. So let's pay the bills before we get out of here.
Yeah.
Enjoying the show? Looking for more goofball action? Consider a membership at buymeacoffee.com/2giantgoofballs. Memberships start at just $5 and give you additional goofball access. One-time support payments also available starting at just $3. buymeacoffee.com/2giantgoofballs.
Oh, yeah. All righty, guys. So that's going to call it a night for us here. So we appreciate you guys listening again, as always. We are going to be, of course, on, again, Wednesday. I said Wednesday. Tomorrow, Thursday.
Yeah. But today.
My schedule at work is different this week than usual. It's throwing my whole week for a loop there. We'll be back tomorrow night, though, for you guys. 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. As always, we are live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and, of course, Rob's favorite,
Drew's Lincoln. Oh.
Now, we're still talking about X. We might go back on X again soon, but
X is going to give it to you.
Unfortunately, Elon Musk has decided that live streaming on Twitter/X to be a service only for those who are paying.
It's got to pay off those Cybertrucks.
I guess so. So we're still debating on that, guys. We'll let you know as far as if we go back onto there again for our live streams there. Probably the next week or two, we'll decide that. As of course, so we are also available to audio podcast platforms there, usually 5 a.m. the next day on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all the big ones there. So if you haven't already, hit the like, hit the subscribe, Appreciate you guys for listening as always, and share it with a friend. Helps us out. We definitely appreciate there. And if you haven't already, send in your entry for the contest, guys. Send it in.
Yourself some Giants history.
Yes. It's free to enter. It's my favorite price. Free.
Yeah.
Free.
If it's free, it's for me.
And I'll take 3. We only have 1 jersey to give away, though, guys. All right, guys. Appreciate you guys listening as always. And as always, Giant fans.
Go, J-Man!
Go, J-Man!
Thanks for listening to Two Giant Goofballs, a New York Giants podcast. We appreciate your support.
Thanks so much.
Please, I'm begging you. Please subscribe.